Oh my, there's some funny people at church. You meet the nicest people. So this morning I want to preach a sermon on the people you meet at church. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to be, if you got a Bible and like to follow along, I'll be reading out of the New International Version of 3 John chapter 1. 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. This is way over in the back. And then there's Jude, and then Revelation. So if you, it's not the Gospel of John, it's the 3 John. Talking about the people you meet at church. David Dean, you know, we laugh at what a joy he is to be around him. And I love one of David's stories, which he told here a month or so ago, and I honestly still wake up in the middle of the night laughing about this one. Remember, he went to sleep in the parking lot of a church. Remember that story? And some of you hadn't heard it. I'm going to go ahead and tell it kind of like he did. It won't be near as good as David does it. But he went to sleep in the parking lot of a church, and he was waiting on somebody, and he said, I felt somebody's hand on me, rubbing and he said, I just went crazy, jumped, and what happened was, his hand had gone to sleep, and he was touching his arm like that. I guess you just had to have been there. Do you guys know Don Green?
Yeah.
Okay, Don is a part of our Cowboy Church, one of the original board members, and his wife Mary. They're just precious people. Don, he has a lot of funny stuff he tells us, and it's more about the way he tells them than the story anyway. But what kills me was yesterday he was out at this trail ride, sitting in a chair, and somehow the lawn chair sunk on one corner, and it throwed him, and fell off backwards off of it. And the first thing he did, he jumped up and he hollered, "Did I go 8 seconds?" And one of my other funny favorites is Denny Gold. Sitting over here, Denny just tickles me, I'll tell you. Denny's been such a good friend to me and my wife and his wife. They're precious to us. And Denny, my favorite stories, Denny, that you tell is about getting beat up by the trash man. I'll tell you that. That just gives me. Denny went out, and some of these days, if you've not heard it, I want to tell it to you. But he went out he was going to go out to do something. He told his wife he was going to go out, and it was the day the trash man was coming. And he went out and was working on his tractor. And he got the PTO hooked in his Carhartt overall and wound up his Carhartt overall in the PTO, jerked his pants off. I mean, pull, and he says the strongest thing in the world is that lining on your underwear. But anyway, he came in the house later and told his wife, he said, honey, I just got beat up. She said, by the trash man? I want him to tell you that whole story. There's a lot of funny people go to church here. Now, when we get to the Bible, today we're going to meet the people you go to church with. I want you to look at them, because John, boy, he really captures the people that he goes to church with, and in 3 John especially. Now, John, as you remember, was isolated on the Isle of Patmos. There, he was being persecuted by the Roman government because he was a Christian and was promoting Christianity, and the Rome at that time was opposed to it. Now later, about 300 years later, the emperor of Rome converted to Christianity, and that's when the church really began to change and whatever. But back in the early days, the Rome was persecuting the church, and John was writing to all the other churches around that he had helped start and people that he was trying to bless. And he wanted to go visit them. He wanted to go see each one of them, but he was in exile and couldn't get to go see them. So he wrote them these letters, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and I'm really glad that we got to read them because they're full of great stuff. Now, the reason John talks, and he talks about people in the church, he met this one guy. We're going to talk about him a little bit today. His name is Diotrephes. And Diotrephes was kind of a pain in the backside. Let's just put it like that. He was not real fun to be around, and he bullied the church wherever he went. And so he has a lot to say to Diotrephes, this guy he met knew about in a church. And the reason John says that Diotrephes was such a pain to be around was because he insisted on being first in everything. In other words, his opinion had to be the first opinion. His plan had to be the first plan. He insisted on being first in everything. And John had some trouble with him. But you know what I believe? Somehow I believe the devil puts a Diotrephes in about every church I've ever been a part of. You know what I'm talking about? Preacher, you know what I'm saying? There's one. There's not any in Oregon, I'm sure, but back here in Missouri, there are preachers, people like that. And this Diotrephes was tough on the church. He ran people off, and guests, he wouldn't receive the guests. And we're going to talk a lot more about him, but that's what John mostly wants to talk about. Let me say to you like this. The church is not perfect. The church isn't perfect, but it's still the greatest hope for the world.
Amen.
It's the greatest hope for our world.
Amen.
Now, this November, we're going to put a new president in office. And whatever president gets in, that's not the greatest hope for this world.
No.
He's not the greatest hope for our world. Science is moving fast, inventing new cures and whatever. That's not the hope for the world. But Jesus is the hope for the world. And so I wanted to say that today because that's what I believe with all my heart. So what kind of people do you meet at church? When you go to church, who are you going to meet? Okay, let's get our Bibles open now to 3 John chapter 1. And I'm going to just take the first 2 words and stop and make a point, all right? And it says here, John begins to introduce himself to the church. And he says, John the elder. In other words, he calls himself the elder. That was his signature on the letter. They signed their names at the very first of the letter. We sign ours at the bottom. But they started out by saying John the elder. And so let me just stop there and talk about the elder. Or the people you meet at church are some of the people who lead at church. Now, it's important that you have leaders in a church, and good leaders. Now, when John called himself an elder, that didn't necessarily mean that he was old. But what that means is that the elders in a community or in a congregation or whatever usually are people of maturity and wisdom who've been around a while and have seen how things work. And in fact, there is some encouragement to talk about not bringing in a novice too quickly into leadership, because sometimes their egos get out of control or whatever. So he's saying that he is John the elder. There are people. See, leadership, I believe, is a gift that God gives to the church. I think leadership makes a huge difference in a congregation. And we have some wonderful leaders here in the Sauk River Church. I have just been blessed by their humility, their wisdom, and they have just done so good. I think it's next Thursday night, if I'm not mistaken. Sometime real soon, they're going to come and have all of our elders, not elders, but our directors will come, and we're going to have a Q&A time just for you to talk to them and ask questions about where we're doing, how's the money, how's the building, and just have a nice communication time. And I think that's good. But leaders are very important, and they're God's gift to the church. Now, leaders come in all forms, all different kinds of leaders. And if leaders are godly and they love the people, they create peace and momentum in a congregation. If there's loving and the people love them and they're godly, the good things happen. Now, if they're arrogant and ungodly, they can create a lot of chaos and honestly just wear people out. Just plain old fatigue can set in around when there's bad leaders, when people are leading that way. Now, let me tell you how to help a leader. You want to know how to help a leader? I'm going to reach into nature and pull out an animal and talk about this. Have you ever seen geese fly over in a formation and they form a V? Well, I think they have a committee meeting and they decide who's going to lead. But anyway, they put a goose out there in front. He leads. He sets the pace and sets the direction. He becomes a leader. Now, what do all the others in the line do? They go, good job. Oh, you're doing good. Woo! Yeah, that's the best. Oh, you're the best leader ever. That's how you help leaders. You encourage them, just like geese. So if you've got the sense God gave a goose, be good to your leaders. Amen. Encourage them.
I didn't see that.
Because even geese know how to do that. Now, if you have the gift of leadership, and some of you do. Now, some of you couldn't lead a horse to water, and you know that. That's all right. You don't need everybody leaders. You can't put up that many of them. But if you have the gift of leadership, as this church continues to grow, and my goodness, how you have been growing this summer. But as we continue to grow, we're going to need more and more leaders in areas and whatever. And so if God has given you that gift of leadership, you step up and lead. You step up. And there's going to be places we're going to need you, and we need you to step up. But when you do, listen very carefully to me. Don't pay attention to anything anybody tells you or advice they give you. you listen completely to the Lord and follow Him exactly and completely, exclusively. Listen to what God says. Because whenever you step up and lead, not everybody's going to like the way you're going. You know, no, you're flapping your wings too fast. You're going the wrong direction. Not all the geese are going, whoop, 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 whoop. They're not all doing that. Some of them are complaining. That's a sorry-ass goose out in front of you. So, but whenever you lead, just remember to listen to the Lord, take your orders from Him, and never act without His leadership. Now, the next thing that we're going to meet, the next man we're going to meet, and John went to church with him and knew him, and his name was Gaius. G-A-I-U-S. Let's hear what John had to say about Brother Gaius. And I love this man already. And you're going to like him too. Good Gaius. I call him Good Gaius. And let's just keep reading verse 1. To my dear friend Gaius, whom I love in the truth. Dear friend, I pray that you may enjoy good health, and that all may go well with you, and even as your soul is getting along well. It gave me great joy when some believers came and testified about your faithfulness to the truth, telling how you continue to walk in it. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Now, just let me be transparent a moment. In the heart of a pastor, there is no greater joy than knowing that his people are growing in the Lord, that they're walking in the Lord, that they're developing closeness with Him and with other good Christian people. That is a great joy for a pastor. And then on the other hand, it just breaks a leader's heart, a pastor's heart, whenever you hear of some of your people that used to be excited about God and in the church and involved, and you hear that they've fallen back and they've stepped out of their mission, and that breaks your heart. But you need to know that there's a lot of good people in the church. People like Gaius, good Gaius. So when you go to church, you're going to meet some people you just like to be around. You just enjoy their fellowship. Good folks. It's kind of like the old boy that had the scruffy old cur dog. You ever seen an old scruffy old cur dog who didn't kind of fit in any category, just ugly? And everywhere he'd take that dog and he'd enter him in really high-class dog shows. I mean, these purebred dogs, he'd always put this old scruffy cur dog in there with him. And they said to him, why do you keep doing that? Why do you keep putting that ugly old dog? He ain't never going to win. He's so old. I don't put him in to win. Just the association with them other dogs does him good. And that's what church is. Just getting to associate with you good folks. It does us good. With the Lord and with you, with each other. So people like Gaius, they make a church wonderful. And I want to just be honest with you. There are so many good Gaiuses in this congregation. Oh my, how you bless me. And how it is such a joy to be a part of this. I know I told you last week, I want to just tell you how much I appreciate getting to be the pastor here. And I don't take this for granted. And this is the joy of my life, to get to be here and to help lead and share in your spiritual journey. So God give us more Gaiuses. Run us over with them, amen? Let us have a lot of them. Old John loved him, and old John prayed for him, body and soul. And that's what pastors do. They pray for their people. They love their people. And they pray for them, even their body, which is temporary and is passing, but it's important. And so we pray for that. But we also pray for their soul. I'm really more interested in your spiritual condition than I am your physical. Because I know that physical is going to someday pass away. But your spirit is going to get better and better all the way through it as you get home. So this Gaius, he also had a good reputation. And part of the reason the church was so successful early on was because Gaius had a good reputation. People around the area knew him. They'd heard about him. Well, is that where old good Gaius goes to church? Well, boy, I want to go there. So one good reputation can really help a congregation grow. Now, in the book of Acts, we meet another fellow that had a good reputation, and his name was Barnabas. And he's called the son of encouragement. And he was such a man that his reputation helped grow the early church. Now, I want to say to you today to strive to be a Gaius. Try to be like Gaius. Be a good Gaius. Good reputation, good name. Because when you do, you're going to bless the name of the Lord. You're going to increase church attendance. Sometimes people go to church, they have such a bad reputation that when you hear their name mentioned, you go, you get a grimace or a cringe. But wouldn't it be neat when your name is mentioned and they say, yeah, I know so-and-so. He goes down to the Sock River Cowboy Church, and they get a smile on their face. because that your life is lived in such a way that you bring glory to God's name and you bring glory to the church. So let's all strive to be Gaius. Everybody want to be a Gaius? Raise your hand. Come on, let's have somebody. There you go. Good for you. Now you get to choose what kind of church friend you're going to be. Remember that. You get to choose that. Nobody's going to call you out and give you a title. You get to choose and you get to set it. Now the next group of people that I want you to meet is people who will give you the shirt off their back. There's some folks, when you go to church, you meet some really nice people, give you anything. Let's read verse 5. Dear friend, you are faithful in what you're doing for the brothers and sisters, even though they are strangers to you. They've told the church about your love. Please send them out on their way in a manner that honors God. It was for the sake of the name that they went out, receiving no help from the pagans. We ought therefore to show hospitality to such people so that we may work together for the truth. Now back in the day that John was writing, there was not a lot of motels and hotels and restaurants. They just didn't have a lot of them. And so when people traveled around the community or countryside, let's just say that they were church workers, missionaries or evangelists or singers or whatever, and they were maybe moving from church to church. Well, the church received them, welcomed them, blessed them, took care of them, fed them, housed them, and they took care of them. And so this guy Gaius, whenever people came to the church, he was the first in line to bless people. He said, come to my house, we're going to have lunch today. And then I want you to stay with us while you're here. He was just really good to people. And he was even kind to those he just met. Those are Christians. He was good to them. And good Gaius, he helped new believers. He helped them all. Now this was a day, if you'll remember, of terrible persecution. Rome was crushing that early church. And so Gaius was there helping hide people and help them travel. He was just a good man. Had such a good reputation that the gossip about Gaius spread around the whole area. By the way, gossip can be positive. Do you know that? As well as negative. And so it was good gossip. And so he used his gift of generosity well. He blessed others. Some of you have the gift of generosity. You have the gift of giving. And if so, bless your heart. You've learned something. Those of you who are great givers, you've learned something. You've learned how much fun and joy it is to give. Now, for you tightwads that haven't found that yet, if you'd ease up just a little bit and open up, you'd discover a whole new dimension of your life. I tell young people, especially when they're getting married and planning their own budgets, I say you need to give the first 10% of your income to the Lord. Give it to the Lord. The second 10% of your income, you put it in the bank. Save it. Savings is a word nobody knows anymore. But you need to save 10% of your income. And then 80%, you live on it. You live on 80%. You don't have to live high and mighty. Calm down a little bit. You can live, but live on 80% of your income. Because then you've got money for your retirement, for your family, and you've also blessing others with your 10%. Learn to be a giver. It'll absolutely change your life. Now let me say to you that at the Sauk River Calvary Church, we are so blessed. We don't have a very high overhead. The only person they pay here is me. I'm the only salaried person in this whole church. And we don't pay a penny for the building. We don't pay a penny for air and heating and lighting. The Livestock Marketing Center, they donate this to us freely. Now, we bless them once in a while with a little extra, but they don't charge us a thing. So what I'm saying is when you give here, you're helping give to a group that we can spread the giving out in the community. And that's what we do. We help schools, we help people with rent and with other transitioning times from jobs. This is a very, very benevolent church. We give great. And I'm so glad to be here. And we don't need to fight over money and worry about how we're going to meet this, because God has just absolutely blessed us with so much. I think last year, just in your giving alone, you gave over $400,000 here in this church. And we don't even take up an offering. Yeah, but you just gave over $400,000 last year in this church. I'm amazed at you. So there's so many good giving people here. You use your gifts good. Well, and if you're not a natural giver, consider stepping into that. I'm not saying give to us. Just give to the Lord. Be generous. Now, the next thing you're going to meet in church, and we kind of hinted at him earlier on, and this is people who can be difficult. How many of you have ever been around a difficult person at church? Have you ever been around a difficult person at work? How many of you married a difficult person? Oh my, I stirred up a hornet's nest now. Well, let's talk about Diotrephes just a moment. Why was he such a pain in the backside? Why was he so hard to get along with? Because he insisted on his way. He insisted he wouldn't hear anybody else's thoughts. He just demanded it all be his way. You've heard it said it was his way or the highway. Well, that was Diotrephes. He just had to have everything his way. Now, one of the most dangerous and destructive things that can happen in a church is you get a few people in there that just got to be their way. What it does, it creates chaos and distrust. And in a church, it can just tear a church wide open. If you got to have it your way. And I've said here so many times at the Calvary Church, we're different here, you know. We're not like a normal church. We don't even want to be like one. So don't try to turn us into a regular church, okay? Leave us alone. Let the Lord lead us. Let's just keep being a cowboy church and not make this like another church. We often, when we talk about it, we say, if it looks like a church, if it walks like a church, if it talks like a church, walk away from it. Don't do it. You know, we don't want to be churchy here. We want to be all about loving God with all our heart and our neighbors ourselves. That's what we're trying to do here. So help us with that. Be willing to set aside your likes and dislikes for the good of the unity of the church. And I know you're doing that now. Let's leave this old bad guy and let's get on to some good people. Go on to verse 11. Now we're going to introduce you to some people who practice what they preach. I like this. Let's read verse 11. Dear friend, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. Anyone who does what is good is from God. Anyone who does what is evil has not seen God. Demetrius is well spoken of by everyone, and even by the truth itself. We also speak well of him, and you know that our testimony is true. I have much to write to you, but I do not want to do so with pen and ink. I hope to come to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace to you. The friends here send their greetings. Greet the friends there by name. Now there is this another guy. So we've got Gaius, and we got Diotrephes, and then we meet another one. His name is Demetrius. Now this Demetrius guy, he is a guy that has a good reputation also. People talk good about him, and he does what is right. He does what is good. And so this is a guy that practices what he preaches. Let me say to you that people are looking for churches and for Christians who do what they say, who practice what they preach. You see, there's nothing more destructive or inconsistent than an inconsistent Christian who says one thing and then does another. And parents, if you want to just ruin your kids, talk real religious around them and then live like the devil. I mean, you'll kill your kids. You'll destroy them because they don't know what the truth is. So if you want to raise good kids, walk it and talk it. Do it both. So we improve, as I said, when we associate with people who love sacrificially, when people do what they preach. Now I want to bear down on this just a minute. You get to choose what kind of a person you're going to be. You get to choose. It's your choice. Nobody makes you. God gave us tendencies and directional things, but by and large, you get to choose who you're going to be. So choose carefully. Don't be a Diotrephes. Be a Gaius or a Demetrius. Be one of those good people with good reputations that love the Lord, love the truth, honor and bless and lift up instead of tearing down. But you get to choose. You get to do that. Now, don't allow a few bad apples to spoil the whole barrel, okay? If you are in a congregation or in this church or others, and you're around people, and there's once in a while a bad apple that demands his own way. Well, here's what we used to do here in the pioneer days in early Missouri. I'm not quite old enough to know, but I've heard talk about it. That when they were clearing land, back in those days, they didn't have chainsaws and didn't have bulldozers, so they would cut down and leave the stumps out in the field. And so when they were plowing, you couldn't plow the stump, so you plowed up close and then plowed around it and just kept plowing. So I'm saying to you today, when you run into a bad apple, I know I'm mixing metaphors, But when you run into a bad apple in church, just plow around it. In other words, don't let it discourage you or defeat you. Because people at church, remember, there's two kinds of people in the world, right? Remember that? Saved sinners and lost sinners. We're all sinners. And so there's going to be difficult people, even in church. And don't get discouraged when they are. Just plow around them. Trust the Lord. Keep your eyes upon Him and keep moving forward. Believe in Jesus. Connect with a good church. And live a good life. So people can talk about your church and you and your faith. Let's pray together.